Do you feel uncomfortable with conflict? I'm Dr. Rob Smith, and I'm a performance psychologist and an author, and I'm here to talk about how to deal more effectively with conflict situations. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a real hat guy, so I enjoy wearing hats to parties and to events. And so for this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to put your thinking cap on, and then we're going to talk about an approach to dealing with conflict that I like to refer to as verbal Aikido. In the martial arts world, Aikido is a very non-offensive, defensive, but highly effective way of deflecting and avoiding the attacker in such a way that they actually end up hurting themselves, or just they don't end up hurting you, which is the most important thing in self-defense. And I'm drawing my material from the work of a man named Izzy Kalman, who got his early start in helping young kids deal with bullies at school. I draw from his techniques and his philosophy in such a way that helps you learn some of the basic principles of his approach. And I found it very effective, not only in my own personal life, but also with my clients. So if you're ready, let's jump in. Let's first talk about a conflict situation. Maybe some of you have gone through or something similar. Say you volunteered to drive a friend to the airport. They had some important thing they had to go to. And what happened was, on the morning of, you somehow fell asleep and didn't wake up through the alarm. The alarm goes off, your friend calls, and you never hear it, and you sleep right through it. So the friend frantically has to jump in a cab, spend $100 on fare to the airport, and by the time they get there, they miss their flight. So yeah, you dug yourself a deep one on that point, on that situation. So I think what you want to do is, obviously, if you want to preserve the friendship, it's up to you right now to apologize. Let me show you some principles for how to apply Izzy Kalman's approach. The first thing he talks about is he says that we have to make the decision to accept that we don't live in a fair world. We have to understand that if we're expected to be treated fairly at all times, we're going to get upset a lot. And that parlays its way into the next point, which is try not to get defensive. So if somebody comes at you and starts to yell at you or talk to you like they're really upset, many times it's natural for us to want to give a response, to say, yeah, but, or get defensive and then perhaps even offensive. So then it escalates. So that's not healthy. So what we want to do is we want to avoid that kind of response. Izzy Kalman says is that we should really get away from this whole eye for an eye mentality, which is essentially waiting to see how someone treats you so that you know how to treat them back. So if they treat you nicely, of course, you'll be nice back. But if they treat you poorly, you might want to think about, if you're an eye for an eye person, oh, well, I'm going to find a way to get back at them. Unfortunately, that usually leads to the escalation of conflict and the thing that you might be afraid of to begin with. And a lot of times it causes people to avoid bringing the conflict up or the situation up to begin with. Instead of the eye for an eye mindset, we might want to go back toward the old golden rule, which is essentially, let's treat people the way they like to be treated, because that stops the escalation of violence. We want to think about, even though I'm going to have to respond to this person in a way that might be firm and fair, I'm not going to do it in a disrespectful or attacking way, because that's not the way I'd want to be treated. So you want to think about managing conflict in a way that has empathy and compassion, but at the same time, you're not being a pushover. So that's really important. And really the key to that also is that you're putting the power back in your hands about how you deal with conflict. The next principle to think about is you might want to try to think about your friend as an ally, not an enemy, right? They're not your adversary. And when they come at you, if you're that friend that comes back from the airport and starts screaming at you for having made all these mistakes, it's going to be hard to think of them as not an adversary at that moment because they're attacking you. And even though you know you're in the wrong, you're more likely to think of them as someone that you now have to defeat. And that's what we do with enemies, right? If they're an adversary, our job is to beat them. And we get into a right-wrong argument, and next thing you know, we're not getting anywhere. And in the end of the day, you don't remember that you actually want to preserve this relationship. So the key is to not necessarily think of them as your adversary, but more like an ally. To do that, you might want to think about whatever they're telling you as having at least good intentions. Good intentions means that even though it comes out sideways, maybe there was a point that you might want to draw from that you can then say, okay, they meant this, even though it came out this way. So now you're giving them maybe a little bit of slack, because that allows you to not get knocked off your center. Again, the key is to stay composed, not get defensive, not go on the counterattack, because that will then trigger this wholly negative response and escalation more likely. And the friend who just got screwed out of, $100 cab fare and missed their flight and the opportunity they were going to, they will feel completely justified in reaming you. What I also want to suggest to you is that there are some techniques for managing the situation. If the friend does attack you and does come at you the way they more than likely will if they're upset, I created this acronym called PEAS. Now, I don't mean P the letter, I mean PEAS the vegetable, P-E-A-S. P stands for paraphrase. So this is your verbal Aikido I was talking about before. The first thing you want to do is to make sure you understand what the other person is saying to you, right? Even though you think you understand, you want to just reflect back to them. I'm going to paraphrase in my own words. Please don't say it exactly as they say, because it'll sound very much like you're mimicking them, and that's going to not necessarily turn out well. But what you want to do is you want to try to put in your own words what you heard them say, having gotten clearance from them that yes, that's what I'm saying. What you want to do is then empathize. And that's what the E stands for. You want to empathize and say, hey, look, if I were you, I would feel the same way. I can see where you're coming from. Again, this establishes you as that ally I was talking about earlier. You then want to appreciate their feedback, right? Because they're your friend. You want to keep the friendship. They shared with you something that's real for them, and you actually were a part of it. So you should thank them, saying, hey, listen, thanks for sharing with me. I know you're upset, and I can totally understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate the feedback. And then S, share. S means now you can share what your perspective is or what you might want to do next, which is an apology. What I want you to do is I want you to listen carefully, reflect back to them what you think you heard them say. For example, I might say to that friend, so what you're telling me is that not only did I cause you undue stress, but I also cost you a fair amount of money, the price of a plane ticket, which was non-refundable, the cab fare, and then also the opportunity you were going to. And, from what you're saying, you're super upset about that and can't believe that I did that to you. And when they say, yes, that's it, or when they say, well, that's not it entirely, then they go on to explain something else. Then you can say, oh, okay, so besides what I was saying before about this, then there's also this. And that allows them to really know that you're tracking what they're saying and you care about what they're saying and their message. I think it was Stephen Covey who said, one of the deepest hungers of the human soul is to feel understood. Even if you don't understand. I gotta tell you, I'm a psychologist. I don't always understand my clients, right? Because I'm not quite on the same page with them yet. So even if I'm using this paraphrasing technique and I don't fully understand where they're coming from, I'm sending the message to them that I care enough to listen and I really want to understand. And I think subconsciously that creates a sense of gratitude, at least a sense of relief that whatever they're sending out, it's being received. So you want to paraphrase, be careful to make sure you understand. You want to empathize with them, make sure you understand that that's how they feel, and then appreciate the feedback, and then give your opinion back, give your feedback. So that's how you can manage a conflict situation. And I will guarantee you that in those situations, and I've used it in my own particular personal life, but also teaching clients, it allows the two people to stay in conversation. So I hope that this has been a helpful video for you today, for you to be able to learn more about how to manage conflict in a non-defensive and more effective way. And if you would like to learn more, I hope that you can subscribe to the channel. And also for more resources, I recently came out with a book called Shooting Out of Your Mind, How to Shoot a Basketball from the Inside Out. And even if you're not a basketball player and you happen to know someone that is, or if you know coaches, it might be a good way to refer. And I want you to take a look at the link below for ordering copies. And really, thanks very much for watching, and I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing you again.